What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over everything you need to know about Fortnite's new Chewbacca update. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, find it helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below what you think of today's update. So we got several new items and some new NPCs on the island, one of which is pretty controversial. We're going to be starting off with the Jawa Scatter Blaster. This is a new shotgun style weapon, and it is most similar to the Chapter 1 double barrel shotgun, even though it has only one shot. So it's a very high damage single shot shotgun, and it overheats after its first shot, but it does have very high damage. So obviously these weapons don't use ammo or anything. You don't need to reload, but it overheats after one shot, and then you have to wait quite a while for it to be usable again. It also doesn't have a high headshot multiplier at only 1.25, so you don't really need to stress headshots with it too much. And this is pretty nice because it does have a decently large spread. So in many situations, you'll be better off just hitting a solid body shot and maximizing how many pellets you hit rather than going for a headshot and missing pellets. With this multiplier being so minuscule, if you hit 4 less pellets because of the, headshot, that might end up not even being worth because the headshot multiplier really isn't that large. And this was kind of similar to how the double barrel shotgun was in Chapter 1, where it had a very little headshot multiplier, and so people would just go for body shots with it and get really high damage. If you are able to hit a perfect headshot with it, though, the max damage for this weapon ranges from 170 for the common all the way up to 190 for the legendary, with each rarity kind of increasing by 5. So 175 for the green, 180 for the blue, so on and so forth. But as I was saying, the damage really isn't that much better with headshots. So the gold one has a 190 max damage if you hit a perfect headshot. It has a 179 body damage. So it's like that 20, not even that 11 extra damage might not even be worth going for a headshot. You might as well just go for the body and then swap to your spray weapon. It's kind of weird to play around that for me. I'm so used to going for headshots with my shotguns, but yeah, with this you kind of don't need to, and you're better off just hitting as many pellets as you can. Personally, I didn't really like this weapon very much. It's very all or nothing, and the cooldown time is 2.2 seconds, which is quite long when it comes to a close range Fortnite fight. I definitely could be better with it. Like, I didn't have the perfect feel for like when to swap back to it. Typically with, shotguns in Fortnite, especially pump style shotguns, you want to shoot your shotgun, then swap to a spray weapon in between shots, right? And since the cooldown on this is so long, you're probably just going to be on your spray weapon for the remainder of the fight. And so if you ended up missing your shot, or maybe just hitting a subpar shot with this Jawa Scatter Blaster, you're going to get out DPS'd by somebody using the auto shotgun or somebody using an ACP pump and swapping back and forth well. I also like using the A280 as my spray weapon and just using pump in that. And this isn't the greatest spray weapon, but I'm able to make up with it because of how good the ACP pump is. And I feel like with this Jawa Scatter Blaster, you're probably much more inclined to carry like a dedicated spray weapon like the F11 or the CR2 SMG. And if I'm going to carry one of those, I feel more inclined to carry a more dedicated long-range weapon. So like to make the Jawa Scatter Blaster work for me, I need to rearrange my inventory in ways that I don't really want to do. This weapon is very lethal. It's very threatening to play against somebody using it because they can just dish out so much damage in a single shot. But I think at this point, I'd still rather use the ACP pump shotgun. Another big change in this update is going to be the AI Vader NPC. This is a new Vader NPC that will follow you around as a hired NPC once you interact with him. And he will spawn at one of 3 locations on the map, which can kind of vary game to game. But you will see his spaceship at the pad to indicate that he's there. So you can tell where he's going to be while you're on the battle bus. You do have to fight him, and for whatever reason, to me, he was like actually crazy. But once you defeat him, you can speak to him and get a lightsaber and Jedi training. He still gives you the throne lightsaber effect, and he will actually heal you to full health and full shield. So you could be at 1 HP when you speak to him. You're going to come out at full HP, which is nice because the area around him is usually very chaotic. As I said, the fight with him was kind of crazy, and a lot of people come to third party this. So him healing you is nice. And once you defeat and talk to him, he will follow you around like a hired NPC. And I didn't really have too much of a problem dealing with him today, but I saw people saying that he is one of the most aggressive and effective hired NPCs when it comes to fighting. And one thing that also makes him very unique is you can speak to him in game chat and he will actually respond. And this is full AI speech recognition. So the things you say to him in the skin you're using and what you're doing will change what response he gives you. Obviously, and this is entirely AI, so a lot of people have, you know, opinions on this that, you know, range on like how much they hate it. Also, it was kind of broken this morning and people were getting him to swear or say like racist things. I think Fortnite has seemingly patched that, but I feel like it's one of those things where it's like whack-a-mole, that people will keep finding some way to break it and then Epic will patch it and so on and so forth. So if you want, you know, the funny content that is around there, that's definitely something that a lot of people will be doing. But even this, regardless of that, he seems to be a somewhat effective hired NPC. Another hired NPC that was added in this update is going to be Chewbacca. The Chewbacca NPC and his Wookie Bowcaster were added back in today's update, and Chewbacca will spawn at a random stormtrooper outpost around the map. There will be kind of like blue smoke around it to indicate that he's there, but I couldn't really see this from the battle bus. But either way, he just spawns at a random stormtrooper outpost, the ones that are on the road. And once you eliminate the stormtroopers there and free him, he will become hired to you and function as a hired NPC. And he will also drop you a legendary Wookie Bowcaster. He functions as a supply NPC, but from my experience, he will only drop you medkits, minis, big pots, and shield bubbles. He did not give me shockwaves at all, despite me holding them out for several resupplies. Like I played a match and just tried to get him to give me shockwaves basically the whole time, and he was not doing it. And the other hired NPCs that we have had in the past would give you shockwaves on somewhat frequent cooldown if you did hold them out and you had room for them, like if you weren't on a max stack. So I don't think he's able to give you shockwaves at the moment, despite past supply NPCs functioning that way. The Wookie Bowcaster is a weapon that we had in Chapter 5, and this is a weapon that you can shoot freely, but it gets a better effect if you charge it. So I think it does about 60-ish damage, but if you fully charge it, it will deal 60 bonus explosive damage around whatever you shoot it at. And this can be really good for, you know, flushing opponents out of cover or cars, because you can actually get splash damage through the car. And I believe it's 60 base damage and 60 explosive damage. Let me actually just check real quick. Okay, no, it is 50 damage for the legendary, 47 for the epic, and 56 for the blue one. So not the greatest damage, but you get 60 bonus damage explosive wise. So when you hit a fully charged shot, you'll be dealing over 100 damage regardless of rarity. If you do hit the opponent, if you hit just near them, you only get the explosive damage. And as I said, this is nice for flushing people out of cover. And it's a pretty solid car counter, because you do a good amount of damage to the vehicle and you do a good amount of damage to the player inside. And I was hoping that like maybe this would be somewhat of a counter to the spaceships, but it wasn't that easy to hit the spaceship because this weapon does have travel time. And if you're decently far away from the spaceship, it's kind of hard to hit it. But I also never was able to do splash damage to the player inside the spaceship, at least the one driving it. For people on the outside, I was able to get splash damage on them, but the person inside driving, I was not able to damage with splash damage when it came to the TIE Fighters and X-Wings. For regular cars, you can easily get splash damage through, but for the spaceships, you don't. So it still does 400 damage per shot to the spaceship if you fully charge it, so it does chunk it down decently well. But I was really hoping to be able to damage the person inside and, you know, make them really have to, you know, struggle to deal with it. But it wasn't that great at griefing the spaceships. Another change in this update is going to be that the Jar Jar NPC was added outside the mid-map gas station, and he sells a blue Jawa shotgun, but he also sells a Chug Jug, and the Chug Jug is 600 gold, which is quite expensive, but there really isn't that much to spend on gold this season unless you're, you know, rebooting your teammates or paying for that boosted reboot. And if you are in a situation where you're not getting heals for whatever reason and you're around that area, I definitely would consider buying the Chug Jug from Jar Jar. So it's like not going to be something that I consistently take advantage of or go out of my way to use. But in certain situations, I could definitely see myself, you know, picking up the Chug Jug from this NPC. We also got a few weapon buffs in today's update. So the DL-44 pistol, which I think is incredibly good. I think it's the most underrated weapon this season. You know, that's a foreshadowing for a future video. But it got its damage increased by 1 for every rarity, and its ADS accuracy improved by 18%. So there's going to be less spread, and you're going to do 1 extra damage. I don't think this is that significant of a buff, but as I said, this was a weapon that I already thought was pretty good. The CR2 SMG got its damage increased by 1 for every rarity green and onward. The common didn't get a change. And then the legendary version of this weapon got 2 bonus damage, and its structure damage was increased by 1, which doesn't matter for zero build, but in build mode that could have matter. This is another weapon that I thought was pretty decent. It's just not really something I want to use with how the season plays out. Like, not something I want to dedicate an inventory slot to. It getting a little buff is nice, but I still don't see myself using it. If you wanted the most cheesy close range setup for this season, it would definitely be the Jawa Scatter Blaster and the CR2 SMG. Just hit hard with the blaster, swap to the SMG for the finish, and you can eliminate people pretty quickly that way. And it won't really take that much skill to do so. Both of those weapons are, you know, decently forgiving. The blaster, the Jawa gun, like, obviously it only has 1 shot, but the fact that you only need to hit a body, I think makes it decently, you know, easy to use. And then the final weapon that got a buff is going to be the BARM ST12 Scatter Blaster, or the auto shotgun for this season. It had its damage increased by about 4 to 5 depending on rarity, which isn't a huge change, but for a shotgun, it's nice. That's typically how much the weapon increases by rarity to rarity. So it's like up 1 rarity for every rarity. And the legendary did get the bulk, or the largest change. And it also got its time to overheat increased, so you can shoot it longer before it overheats. I didn't use this a lot today, but the few games I did use it, it definitely did feel a lot better than it previously did. I think I would still prefer the ACP pump, but if you already liked the auto shotgun, or, you know, you weren't really sure what shotgun to use, this buff might be significant enough for that to be your preferred shotgun this season. It definitely felt much better to me today than it did previously. And then one final thing I want to touch on is that there's still no shockwaves from turning the air sprites into the shrines. That's one thing that gets talked about a lot this season, because last season it was guaranteed shocks. Still no shocks that way, unfortunately, so it's still going to be a bit of a struggle for you to get mobility items. And then with this update, the super styles were also unlocked, so you can, you know, get the extra styles from the battle pass. And then the General Grievous NPC can now begin to be unlocked. I think you just need to get levels to eventually unlock him, but previously you couldn't get him. Today you can. But that is going to be it for this video. As always, if you guys did find this to be helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.